Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Parenting Reframe podcast. I am joined by an incredibly special person today. She's one of my favorite humans. I am here with Lauren, my good friend. And before I go on and gush about her, I want her to kind of jump on. And one, thank you, Lauren, for being here. And two, can you just share a little bit with us about who you are and all the goodness you kind of put out into the world?
Yes, thank you, Albiona. That's what a beautiful introduction. I'm happy to be here. Our souls are just like, I'm ready to connect. So, hi, I'm Lauryn Laszczak. It looks hard, but it sounds easy. I am, first and foremost, I am a mom of four, three here on this earth and one in heaven. I am an entrepreneur and a mentor for incredible souls like yourself. Um, I live in the Midwest right here with you in
Yeah.
Michigan, which, is that's our roots, my grounding, but I have lived in other places and I've been brought home more recently. Um, I also feel that our souls are always on, this personal evolution. So at this moment in time, the way that I would describe how I show up in the world is that I am here to remind women and moms, especially, the importance of slowing down and living a much more intentional life. And I do that, through many different facets, which I'm sure that we will get into. But as I was sharing with you before we jumped on the call, I feel like I'm existing in this moment in this very tender space as a mother. And since I know other mothers are listening, I think it's so important to share this. It's almost hard for me to share who I am right now and what I do because there's just a tenderness in the transformation. Like the moment that I'm in, before we jumped on the call, I literally pulled the card that I shared with you, which was butterfly spirit. Transformation is beautiful. And I
Mm.
feel like that's exactly where I'm at. I'm in this very much this like the cocoon phase is coming to an end and my wings are like it's like ready to go, ready to fly. And I say that because I'm just next month, my youngest little son, Sammy, he turns four. He turns one. Um, I'm gonna have to really sink into where I have a feeling I know where that came from. I think we'll probably go there in this episode. Ooh,
Yeah.
actually felt chills in my body when that happened.
Mm.
Oh,
Keep
okay.
going. Keep going.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Fair.
Well, I say that with like there's a tenderness in me because I do have a son that is four in heaven and would be five.
Mm.
So I have no doubt that he was just like
Yeah.
coming through for me there. But my youngest here on this earth is going to be one, which means that, we're forever postpartum. But I
Yeah.
feel like my postpartum, like in the depths of babyland, is sort of coming to an end for me personally. And even yesterday, I had to have like a whole ceremony over my garbage can because I threw away his last container of formula, which was like such a moment. And so I feel like there's a coming home that's happening and it's tender because I really, for the first time in my life, have given myself full permission to be so slow and so present with where I was for Sammy in that first year of his development. So yeah, it's really fun to be here today because I'm like, man, first podcast postpartum. Like I
Yeah.
can just feel the shift coming, which is interesting to navigate.
It's so beautiful and it's so indicative of who you are. I mean, I think for me, you've certainly been a mentor, a dear friend, a soul sister, but you've really sort of taught me the value of really embracing sort of not just spirituality, but this idea of the unknown and the unseen and really tapping into like a bigger purpose and a greater service and really like allowing ourselves to be used in a way that will help others and will serve
Mhm.
others. And you have so many sort of beautiful stories in your mothering journey and in your life journey that I know resonates with so many moms and so many women. Really, I think sometimes we sort of pigeonhole ourselves into one role, but the truth is like we wear multiple hats. And even the question of like, who are you is right, a big
Mhm.
one because it changes, it evolves. It's so many different things at one time. And it's
Yeah.
tough to kind of give that one clean and concise answer. So I can totally
And
understand sort of the bigness of that question, right?
yeah, and I just want to add, I think that most women that I speak with, and work with, like, there's a lot of shame around that, right?
Mhm.
We're kind of in a world where it's like, what's your elevator pitch? You know, who
Yeah.
are you? Who's your avatar? How can you describe yourself in 160 characters? And I just feel like the women that are in my world, one of the big lessons that we have to learn together is that we are multifaceted human
Mm.
beings. Like, we are
Yeah.
multidimensional, and it's impossible to describe who you are, what your soul has, arrived here to learn and to share and to be. And so I kind of laugh at that question because it's like, well, for what audience? You know what? And I think that's the part that is that really trips me up and my heart hurts for other women. It's like we walk into different places and spaces and we're like, who are we here?
Yeah.
Who are we supposed to be here? And we show up as just one piece and part of ourselves. And it's just not the whole picture. And I feel like that's been a huge part of my own personal development, is really allowing myself to be all of me in all places and spaces. And that's the work that I do with women, with parents, with mothers, because it's huge. It just shifts everything for us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. God, I
Mhm.
love so many pieces of what you just described. Can we sort of jump into, you mentioned having one of your sons is in heaven. And I think so many, I've met women who have worked with you and who have been close to that journey or have experienced loss themselves. And I think you just do such a beautiful job of holding space for the duality of like loving on your kids here and having these wonderful moments where you're present and you're there with them while also allowing your body to grieve and hold space for that part of you that really misses Benjamin and really, honors the fact that he's also here too. So
Mhm.
I think for any person who might be going through it, would you want to share a little bit of your story and just what brought
Yeah.
you to this space of being able to really hold? A big theme for me this year has really been this idea of like, how do we hold multiple truths at the same time, right? Like,
Mm.
how can I be sort of joyful and joyous and present and happy while also still feeling maybe the sadness that might still be in my heart? And like, how do I allow those two things to be in the same space? And I
Mhm.
think you're just like the perfect example of somebody who does that so eloquently and beautifully every single day. So can you
Thank
take us to
you.
sort of some of those moments and a little bit of your journey and how you've really consciously and thoughtfully really worked at transforming, healing, taking that pain and allowing it to really break you open in a way that has just been really beautiful to watch as your friend.
Yeah. Oh gosh, thank you for all of that. And thank you for using Benjamin's name. Like,
Yeah, of
oh,
course.
so
I
important.
know.
It's so important for anyone listening who has moved through a lost journey. So important to really revel in, you know, the name and the moment, the season. Like, we're all present in it all the time anyways. I think most people are like, oh, I don't want to say anything, I don't want to do the wrong thing. It's like, you
Yeah.
can't. you know
Yeah.
it's already here, it's already in the room. So
Mhm.
um yeah, I would be honored to share that. Really loops right back into, my work in the world, reminding women to slow down and to be more intentional. And so I do want to say, and I'm sure you'll say this at the beginning of the episode, like, total trigger warning. If
Mhm.
anyone is listening who is moving through a loss, who has moved through a loss, and you're just not in a place to receive my voice, these words, this message, it's totally okay to stop here and come back when you're ready. So it's
Mhm.
really important that your nervous system is prepared for this conversation. Um,
Absolutely.
so for me, yes, my grief and my joy can coexist. That has been the affirmation for almost 5 years for me. Um, and that journey really started from a place of um, a complete halt moment in my life.
Mhm.
So I'll take you back. So sort of quickly, um, I was already a mother of two little girls, and I was pregnant with my third. And I, at the time, was running three businesses and just the busiest lady around, doing all the things, just throwing all the balls were in the air. Like, I'm just imagining like the juggling. I know mamas can really, really understand this, right? It's like
Mhm.
we have a lot on our plates, and I was absolutely holding up all the plates in a way that felt like it was on my own, by myself, I got it. Don't worry about me. No, I don't need any help here kind of situation. And it was my third. So I was like, people were like, slow down, or like, take your time, or, don't lift that chair. And I was like, Psh, it's my third. Like, I got this.
Mhm.
No biggie, throw another one into the mix. And I was completely surprised when he didn't arrive. And it sounds, I don't know. It sounds silly even in me saying it, but I was so naive to the
Yeah.
fact that sometimes babies don't actually arrive. Like had never had that experience. I had never been around that experience. I was really not witness to any women in my life who had moved through this type of loss. So I was almost 32 weeks pregnant, and I did not know I was having a boy. And of course, it was my first boy,
Mm.
and he arrived as a stillborn and completely just shook up my entire life, our entire lives. Our whole family was really rocked by this situation at the time. I can remember getting home and literally searching online, like, what is a stillborn? I just wasn't,
Yeah.
it wasn't in my world. It wasn't in my recollection and anywhere. And so, um, I was in a really dark place for a while, and it was the first time in my life that I had given myself full permission to stop,
Mm.
to not do a thing, to lie in my bed and be supported by the people around me.
Yeah.
And I mean, our parents were taking care of our living children. My husband was taking care of me. Like, it was really the dark night of the soul moment for me. And weirdly, it was or maybe not so weirdly, again, the first time in my life where I was just sort of still.
Mhm.
And it was really difficult for me. Like, my nervous system was like, I don't even know what to do with this. And I find this really interesting now because I talk so much about nervous system work, and I know that it's easier said than done because I've been there. Like,
Yeah.
I know what it's like to live in fight or flight and freeze and fawn. And it was the first time in my life I was like, oh, this is what it looks like to be still
Mm.
and to do nothing and to truly just be. Like, I had wrapped up so much of it, my existence, in my doing, right? Even as a child,
Mhm.
like showing up, doing all the things, getting straight A's. Like, no one had to tell me what to do. I just was like such an old soul. I was doing it all on my own, and carrying that with me through my adulthood.
Yeah.
And this was 2019, and I really allowed myself to be in that place for 6 months, for sure. Like, just kind of like out, like, I don't want to say disassociating because I was still present. I was still doing the things. My body was still physically there, but yeah, in
Mhm.
a way, like, it was like I wasn't really there. And there was finally a moment when I was like, okay, we gotta come back. Like,
Mhm.
my people need me, and
Yeah.
even at the time I had a podcast, I had an amazing business, and I just let it all fall apart because I didn't have any sustainability in any of those things, which is why I love to do that now with my clients. But um, the first answer for me was like, okay, how do I come back home to myself? And the thing that I heard was, well, you have to learn how to breathe again. And I just
Mm.
went on this journey of pranayama and breath work, and really being able to do the work to tap into my body again, which was interesting because what was revealed to me was I had thought that this experience had disconnected me from my body, like solely this experience. And what I realized was, oh no, you've been pretty disconnected your entire life. Like, you've had an unhealthy relationship with your body for your entire life. And I know so many women are probably nodding their head yes to this, right?
Mhm.
Like, just
Mhm.
growing up as a woman in this society in this time, it's not easy. And so it was truly, for me, my lost journey was the opening towards embodiment, towards a version of me that I could have never prepared for or planned for. And I
Mhm.
just tried my best to let it unfold naturally. And so what that looked like was, you know, finding different modalities for healing, breath work, yoga, I mean, honestly, Reiki, you name it, I did it.
Mhm.
And it was just me trying to come back and feel less shame and guilt in my body for this loss that I had experienced. And in doing so, of course, because I think, I don't know, light workers on this planet will understand it. It's like it became Benjamin's soul was just so much bigger than I could have ever dreamed of. And it became the gateway for all of my work in the world. And in time, as I was like coming to and coming back, everything around me started to transform too, but in a slower way. Like I was
Yeah.
really intentional to allow things to unfold slowly and without gripping or grasping or pushing or pulling. It was like I knew I had no control anyways. And
Mhm.
so Benjamin taught me that. He taught me like as much as I like to think I do, I have zero control over
Yeah.
anything. So if that's the truth, like how can I learn to sort of flow? Like how can I let the river kind of do its thing, instead of
Yes.
standing in the way and like pushing the river? That's what I felt like I had been doing most of my life. It was like, why won't things go faster? And like, why won't things do it like this way? It was like me, I was like standing in the river, like pushing the river in the opposite direction of its flow. And he was just like, no, 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 we can't exist like that anymore. Like, get out of your own way, just let the river flow. And I've kind of just been letting that happen over the past almost 5 years, as I kind of said in the beginning. He's 4 now, and he would be
Yeah.
5 in September. And so since then, I've had the amazing honor of holding space for mothers and for women and mothers in waiting. And I've held circles all over the world. I have a retreat company and a well-being company where we do
Yeah.
retreats here locally and around the world. And I've done breath work with groups, and um, Ben has an affirmation healing deck out in the world that you can purchase. And even locally here in Detroit, I'm working with
Yeah.
the Fourth Tri Sanctuary, and we're holding a loss circle for women. So, um, the duality that I hold that you mentioned is like, I still do have 3 living children, and I've had a child since, right? So that's a
Yeah.
whole nother journey. But the duality that I feel like I live with is like having this very celebratory moments and being in the aliveness and the beauty of my parenting. And also every time I share anything, there's just that part of me that's like, oh, whose heart is this going to break?
Yeah.
Because I just know that there's so many women walking around us that desire to be mothers and truly are mothers, but in a way that society doesn't recognize.
Mhm.
And, I try to weave that as much into my work, the fact that our grief and our joy does coexist, whether it's a child or a parent or a grandparent or a friend, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just these losses, they form who we are. And I've been really doing my best to slowly and intentionally, allow for that experience to inform how I show up in my work in the world and also in my parenting, in my household, in my community, or with my friends. It's
Yeah.
not easy work, but I think I think we signed that soul contract together. So we're doing it together, Benny and I.
Uh, I completely agree with that. As I listen to you and as I've, been able to sort of be witness to some of parts of your journey and certainly been able to experience sort of the gifts of what you give to so many others, myself included. I really feel like what he ultimately gave you, which is just the biggest gift ever, was this notion of surrender, right? Like this
Mhm.
idea that, like, how do we completely surrender and know that we're going to have, just having the faith that I will be okay, that I will get through this, that I will bring me to the next step part or the next part of my journey. And in your case, there was so much with that, right? Like all these different modalities for healing, which you're an incredible teacher for now, all these different circles and these spaces that you're able to cultivate, facilitate, and hold for others that really came as a result. So think of, like, I always kind of say this to my kids, who are now older, but even when they were younger, I used to always say, like, what is the ripple effect you want to have in the world? Meaning, like, if you're nice to one person, that one person turns around and remembers that and is kind to somebody else. And like, there's so much that happens. Like, there's the actions that we see, feel, and hear in front of us, and then those then have a ripple effect. And I always would say this to them so that they had a bigger understanding of like energetics and
Mm.
how these things move through, right? Like seeds that we plant aren't just for the people in front of us, but it also continues to spread in ways that we can't hold on to or see. And so for me, listening to
Mhm.
you, like with Ben's story and what who you have really grown and become as a result of that really hard experience, is that you've been able to have this incredible ripple effect, right? And that magic is really like where Ben's soul really lives, is like in the ability to say, well, like, we can do this together in this, way. And so you've been able to really honor his spirit and his soul's mission. And I just think it's so
Yeah.
beautiful, and to really be able to hold space for others. So I
Thank you
love
for
that
that
so much.
reflection. Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's again me, bearing witness and having the absolute pleasure of knowing you too. It's you can see that you really took that, what is such a, just difficult and such a hard moment. Many can understand that, and really
Mm.
just kind of rose from it and said like, okay, now how do I find my way? But what I love about it too is that you mentioned that you gave yourself permission to be still, right? And I've myself have cultivated stillness practices, and I was talking to you about this before the call, but my spiritual teacher always sort of talks to me about this idea of like there is so much value in slowing down. So like,
Mm.
and that's something that I've written about, and it's something that I practice every day, and it's something really that requires it's much easier said than done. I will say that. And I
Yeah.
also think that it requires such consciousness around our action, such presence, such intentionality. At least for me,
Yeah.
there's this idea of like when that kind of feeling to hurry up comes in, how am I channeling the ability to say, like, whoa, plant those feet down, feel the ground under you, steady yourself.
Yeah.
Does this need an immediate answer? Does this need an
Mm.
immediate response? Sometimes it does, right? But there are
Yeah.
plenty of times, I would say more often than not, that slow is your friend, right? Like you can totally decide to choose slow in those moments. And it's really shifted and changed, I mean, countless things in my life. So
Mhm.
talk to me a little bit about what that means for you to really live
Sure.
a slow living, and how do you sort of bring that into your world, and how do you
Mm.
teach it to others?
Mhm. Yeah, slow living is seeking a simpler, sustainable, and meaningful life. And the truth is that we are all pretty much running around with like chickens with our heads cut off most of
Mhm.
the time. We're exhausted, we're overwhelmed, and we feel like something is missing. And so, in an effort to figure that out, in an effort to like literally to
Mhm.
make things happen, to will things into being, we try to fill that hole. And what we really want, at least for me, almost 99% of the time when I am slow and still enough to hear myself, what we really want is
Mhm. Yeah.
less worry, less stress, less debt,
Mhm.
less stuff.
Yeah.
But we are so scared of that. We are so scared of that because we have been taught that more is better, that, your value is in what you produce and now what you consume.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so this wearing sort of this badge of honor that I am so busy has become how we show our value in society. And the crazy part is that, and not so crazy, right? Because think about how you feel when you're on a vacation, when you're just sitting on the beach somewhere. You're just like, oh, you
Mhm.
just feel so good, so complete. And it's because no part of you feels like you really have to produce something in that moment in order to be worthy.
Yeah.
And so I think that slowing down is honestly one of the most courageous acts that we can commit ourselves to. And you'll find that when you do, it's really hard. It is really hard because we have to literally shed the layers, all the stuff that we have learned our entire existence. And so it's a courageous act. Um, but when you do it and when you commit to it over time, very small like just small
Yeah.
changes. I think this is the part that I really try to um, show up and like show others in the way that I show up online and share in my stories and mentor others. It's not big shifts. It's small mindset shifts, small moments of consistent changes. And all of a sudden, the things that we thought we wanted, which really underneath sort of the surface, what we really want, happiness, joy, love, fun, play,
Mhm.
freedom, like they
Yeah.
start to show up for you because they're not, I don't know, they're not masked in a way that you've allowed them to be. Because we think like those are the things we want, money, successful businesses, more, more, more. Underneath it all, that's what we really want, that stuff, the joy, the happiness, the freedom. And it's like, okay, what would happen if you stopped adding things to,
Yeah.
into the mix and started removing things?
Yeah.
How would you create more spaciousness inside yourself and sometimes even around you? Because some of it is truly physical clutter to actually see those things now, right
Mhm.
here, right in front of us. I think that for me, that's what Benny did. He was just like, instead of it being a slow process, unfortunately, it was kind of like a rug pulled out from
Yeah.
underneath me. But I needed it because I was so deep. Like I was so down
Mhm.
the rabbit hole of doing in order to receive, in order to receive love, to receive, recognition, to be seen.
Mhm.
And it was like, "Oh, shit. I don't need any of that to be seen. I can see myself right here, but only when I'm slow and still enough. Only when I'm
Yes.
slow and still enough to hear my own intuition, just to have the channel is kind of like cleared up so that I can receive and the actual action that I need next." Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's truly a
Such
spiritual practice.
It is. No, and it makes total sense to me. And I'm going to give a sort of tangible example of where it showed up for me,
Yeah.
that I know you'll probably relate to. And one of them is like something that you helped me do. But, I left my job at the end of May, which and I loved my job. But it was a very like, right, busy at 9 to 5. It was a lot of structure. And so now I'm in this new sort of
Mm,
space where I'm creating and offering different services and thinking about how I can show up for my community and for other parents or other people who are really looking to heal and really look at parenting as this life skill of like, how do we parent ourselves? And I came to you, with these ideas and I was like, I don't know. And what, should I offer this package or should I, and you said, oh, well, just sit with it. Right. And at no given point had I ever just really like sat with like what's really coming up, what feels good, what feels right, like
yeah.
allowing my body to intuit. And I consider myself a very intuitive person, but I was really, because of like my whole structure changing, I was sort of needing to adjust to this new space where I could create and
Mm,
serve. But like, what does that look like in terms of, monetization? And what does it look like in terms of like when we look at the practical piece of it, right? Like, how am I going to make this sustainable? How are we going to, right? And those are real concerns. We talk
they
about that
are.
too, they're real concerns, but not by abandoning that still piece, not by abandoning our intuition. And I think what you're describing and what I hear and what I used to see in myself was there was this bypassing of that phase and
Mm,
jumping right into the doing, because the doing is what creates the money and the money is then what creates sustainability. And so again, these are all these external markers that we're looking for, but instead
mm,
I really needed to look at like what feels really resonant to me, what feels like a space where I know I can serve and help. And what I really did was, as I was creating different pieces of content, the answers started to come. Parents started to say to me, like, oh my gosh, you talk a lot about emotional regulation in kids. I never got that. How do I help
mm,
myself? How do I
mhm.
parent myself? How do I create a business like you did? And all of it just kept pointing back to this idea of parenting. So, anyways, I wouldn't have gotten there had
Yes.
you not been the one to say, where are you holding space for yourself? Where are you
Yeah.
sitting still? Where are you, and I work with clients now on this same practice, and stillness can look different for everybody. So I'll kind of
Yes.
describe a little bit of what my practice looks like, and I'd love to hear a little bit of how you kind of incorporate it. But for me, stillness is like first thing in the morning, I never check my phone. I always like start off
Mhm,
by that. I just don't
mhm.
even look at it. I don't look at email. I don't turn anything on. I don't have any sounds on. There's no TV going, nothing like that.
Mhm.
And I'm just either reading something that's really spiritual or inspiring, something from, a mentor or a teacher, and then I'm breathing, I'm going outside and grounding, weather permitting. There's things like that that really help my day start in a way that feels open and
Mhm.
vast and spacious. And that's generally what I'm craving. So, what does it
Yeah.
look like for you? Because sometimes stillness can also be a walk, it can be a silent
Yes.
drive somewhere, right? I tell my clients all the time, like when my kids were little, when I would be in the car and they weren't with me, I would turn the radio off. I would just be still and driving, and it would feel so good, right? Like, what
Yes.
does stillness look like for you is going to feel different. And it's just a matter of like, where do you just get to sort of be? And then also open that channel to allow for like what
Mhm.
needs to come through, what messaging, what you just hearing your own voice, right? So, what
Yeah.
does it look like for you? How do you
Oh,
cultivate that?
I'm gonna share that, but I do wanna say this because this message feels really strong.
Yeah.
The reason that we don't still, and even if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't know, you just feel almost like, you're having a reaction to this. If
Hmm.
you're having a reaction to this
Yes.
conversation,
This is triggering you.
I just wanna say that it's because most of us don't actually want to be still because we don't trust ourselves in the
Mm,
stillness.
my gosh. Mic
This
drop.
is this is the key part that it's like if I don't trust myself, if I don't believe that, my voice, my inner voice is worthy, that my being is enough, like if we don't do the real deep healing work to understand that we can trust ourselves, we can trust our bodies, we can trust our own intuitive messages, then none of this matters. You can
Yeah.
be still and still feel complete dysfunction in your body. So it's not really the act necessarily of just being still. It's it's the deep inner healing work of what stillness gets to represent. And as a woman who I think being a woman is I think all I really need to say actually is as a woman. Because there's just been so much messaging our whole lives about how we shouldn't trust our bodies, about how our bodies aren't enough, about how we need to be, thinner and prettier and buy this product so that you can, have this X result and change who you are. Like the world has been messaging to us that we are not enough just as we are because of that. And I'll just add a layer for me as a woman who has moved through loss and has deeply distrusted her body in a very simple, what I believed was a natural function as a woman. Like I really had a lot of shame and guilt for a long time and
Mhm.
felt like something was wrong with me, that I had done something wrong, that my body had done something wrong. If I were to be still in that, it would just be torture.
Yeah.
It would just be painful. Like if you're not in a place to be still in your body, but also love your body and trust your body and feel honored to be in this body, then whatever you do isn't going to matter. Like we have to do that work first. That is why somatic practices for me are such a big important part of my
Mhm.
stillness journey. And I'm not even still when I do them,
Yeah.
like sometimes for me, being still and slowing down looks like having to shake,
Yeah.
looks like having to move, to dance, to yell, to walk, to be in nature, to put my hands on a tree, to
Mhm.
speak to my grandmother. Like it's not, I don't know, it's like I know you get this because
Yes.
we're sort of we're in this spiritual work together. It's just it's not the superficial stillness, being quiet, sitting on a log somewhere and listening to the birds chirp. Like that I love all that too.
Yeah.
But it's like if we don't do the deep healing work of actually being able to exist in our stillness, then this whole conversation is pretty much mute, which is why, for me, again, somatic work, going on retreats, taking myself
Mhm.
out of my normal atmosphere and having the spaciousness to hear myself, to feel myself, to trust myself, to listen to myself, to know myself.
Mhm.
Um, even breath work for me. It's why I'm so passionate about breath work, because it is a huge transformation in, a very small amount of time. I don't have to do a
Yeah.
week's long retreat. I could do it in 45 minutes. Like, those to me are my practices of slowing down. So it's everything you said and all of this too, because we can't do, I think about your podcast, like this idea of reframing.
Mhm.
We can't really be in our bodies and be in our stillness and be on a slow journey without reframing what that gets to look like for us as this
Yeah.
version of us in this season
Mhm.
of life. And we can't do this work alone either. Like, this is why I have mentors. I go to things, I
Yeah.
receive, like, you
Mhm.
have to do things to receive. We're always constantly giving, which is why we're exhausted and overwhelmed. And basically we have zero energy to even be still. Like, such a wild
Yeah.
thought, isn't it? Like,
It
obviously, like,
is.
this really gets my gets me going,
Yeah.
because it's not the conversation that's being had, and it's sort of like the work underneath the surface.
Yeah.
Um, but I just do want to say, and on top of that, it could start with some of those small acts, right? It could
Yeah.
start with, I ground every day. Yes, I try to be in
Mhm.
nature every day. I try to journal. I try to, even an act of hugging my children heart to heart and holding the hug for, 10 seconds, that is an act of stillness. Like, that is an act of slowing down and being present with our
Yeah.
heartbeats and what's here. And I think that to me it's, that's where it's at. Like, that's where it's been the most freeing for, like, I just want to go, ah, like,
Yeah.
my shoulders can relax. I can, like, let my hair down. Like, I don't have to busily move through life. I can be present for this one precious life. And that is a huge responsibility and act of courage.
I love that you said so many good things there, and it's so true. Like, you're right. I think we think of stillness as like I'm in some kumbaya, seated position with like a special pillow and a certain space. And that's beautiful if those are the things that really allow you to cultivate stillness, and certainly keep doing it. But that, yes, it's through movement, it's through different modalities. It isn't only, doing formal meditation. It was funny. I don't know if you're an Eckhart Tolle fan. I don't know if we've talked
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
No, we haven't.
So anyways, like I love A New Earth. I've read it a few times actually. And I usually don't read books twice, but his I did. And it's been a while, but anyways, he was being interviewed by Oprah and she asked him like, well, you must meditate. Like there was this assumption that like he meditated and he goes, not formally. And I was like, yes, because I
Mhm.
always felt that way too. Like I'd never have just sat there and just for like 25 minutes just focused on my breathing. But what I have done is a
Yeah.
lot of the practices that you've described. So then he said, like, well, what does it really mean to meditate? He said, meditation is really a form. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people do it. So I don't want to simplify it completely. But the reason we really do it at its core is like, how do we find stillness and presence? Well, if
Mhm.
I can find stillness and presence at a train station while I'm just sitting and I'm just feeling myself breathe and I'm feeling my body, and then I start to experience gratitude for the moment, and then I start to see myself as an extension of everything around me, isn't that also meditative?
Yes.
And if I'm
Yes.
on a walk and I see this beautiful tree, like you said, and I feel the desire to sort of put my hands on it, isn't that also a meditative practice? Like,
Mhm.
so he
Mhm.
framed it really differently. And I think ever since then, I was like, oh my goodness, that's right. Like, I think sometimes a meditation practice to us can sound very like, especially if you're a very kind of quote unquote busy parent, I think it feels very like, that's not my world. Like, you don't understand what my morning just looked like. And now you're asking me to go sit and meditate for 30 minutes. Like, it really doesn't have to be incorporated in that way. It
Yeah.
really, you can, like you said, we can lean into it in these really small ways. But for me, at its simplest, is like, how can you create more moments of presence throughout your
Yes.
day? And that is already starting to create a stillness practice. And then from there, the ripple effect again, like what you start to receive back when you do those moments, you and I both know this, right? It's like
Mhm.
unmeasurable. It's because it's so
Unmeasurable.
beautiful and it's just, and you know it and you feel it. And then there's this reciprocal kind of act that happens where it's like the more you do it, the more you want to do it, the more it feels so good, the more you can
Yeah.
give. And it's
Yeah.
just this, the reciprocity is so beautiful. So
Yeah,
Again, for anybody who's listening and going like, oh my gosh, like, what are they, like stillness for us is, you're a busy parent. I'm a busy person. I'm also a parent, but my kids are older. So it looks very different. But with that said, like stillness for me is really cultivated. It can be cultivated even in the most chaotic moments, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, really try to be a model for that. The truth
Yeah.
is, like, I love slow living. I love the slow living movement. But if you look it up online, very, very neutral feeds, people, relaxing and like just,
Yeah.
it's very idealistic. And I try to be a model for this idea of slow living in a totally different way. I mean, I am a mom of four. I will
Yeah.
never say I'm busy, but I do live a very full life. I think that's a beautiful reframe for anybody
Mhm.
listening because busyness carries a frantic energy. And so
Yeah.
even when I show up in circles and I'm like, how are you? Like, haven't seen a mom in a while. I'm so busy.
Mhm.
You can feel the resonance of that
Yeah.
word. It's become, quote unquote, like a bad word for us. And I can't, my nervous system is like, no, no, thank you. So yes, I live a very full life. Like we have a lot happening.
Mhm.
But at the same time, like, and also, I live in the suburbs, I live in the
Yeah.
suburbs of Metro Detroit. I have children that have to go to be dropped off and picked up and, they have sports and all these things. So I really want to model this idea of slow living right where we are. You
Yes.
don't have to live on a farm and I mean, I would
Off the
love to.
grid.
You don't
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. You don't have to be off grid. I mean, I'm totally here for that in the future, but right now, like this is where I'm at. So I think a practice of stillness and slowness is just being conscious enough to be present with where you're at, what's moving through you, what you're feeling, how your nervous system is reacting to things. Like I very frequently, will be around my children and be very activated. Our children really can activate our nervous systems. And it's like, instead of having a reaction or like a pushing or like let's busy our way through this. I think a great example, let me give an example because I think this is helpful. Like that feeling of rushing out the door in the morning. It's so easy to get into a rhythm of just rushing out the door and rushing your children. You can feel, even as I say it, right? You can feel it in your
Mhm.
nervous system. It's just like there's an anxiousness, you can feel like a heat energy kind of rising within you. You want to raise your voice. You want to like your ego starts to show up really loudly. That right there, an act of stillness and presence is to just be witness to it. Like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm doing that again.
Yeah.
Okay. How can I slow down? How can I change what's about to unfold for just the next 5 minutes? It's not every day, it's not huge changes, it's little shifts and you make different choices and you're like, oh, you know what, babe, yeah, you take 5 minutes to tie your shoe because the world's going to just keep going if we're 5 minutes late. Like it's just
Yeah.
like sort of having that present moment of like, this is where I'm at. Is this desirable for me? No. Okay, what's the small change? How can I slow this moment down just a little so that my nervous system can settle, so that I can take a deep breath? Okay, we're good. It's all good. I'm safe here. My children are safe here. We're going to make it there on time. The world's not going to end if we're 5 minutes late.
Mm.
That is an act of slow
Yes.
living. That is an act of presence. And those small moments and small shifts, they add up. They add up
Totally.
in a huge way.
That's such a beautiful example. And it's funny, I was just working on this, but I read this piece of research and I thought it was really profound and it speaks to exactly what you're talking about. They looked at older, like I believe 10 and older, at kids who demonstrated really anxious tendencies or had really a lot of
Mm,
anxiety. And they kind of wanted to see what the patterning looked like in these homes, right? In terms of like what these children were experiencing compared to a child who maybe wasn't demonstrating anxious behaviors. And what they ended up finding was almost unanimously, not across the board, but a really strong common thread that most of these households shared was parents who rushed. And
mhm.
there is like you said, exactly that, like even the energy of it, if even as you're thinking of like what it
Oh,
feels like to have to
can
rush
feel
and to be
it.
behind. I taught myself that when my kids were younger, something very similar happened. I think we were going to be late. I was going to be late picking them up from school, and that just felt really terrible to me. And I think there was a lot to unpack there, but it was like a bad moms pick up their kids
Mhm.
late. You have to be there on time, blah, blah, right? Like, so all that kind of stuff's running through my head, and I'm rushing, and I'm driving, and I'm driving too quickly, and I'm holding onto that steering
Yeah.
wheel too tight, and your whole body's responding, right? And then I stopped and I just said to myself, like, they're safe. A friend texted me to say, I'm holding on to the kids until you get here.
You're fine.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is all self-imposed. This is my own doing to my physical body right now. Like, I'm the one
Yes.
doing this to myself right now. And
Yes.
it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, I will not let myself really carry that frantic energy anymore. I will simply
Mm.
accept the moment that I'm at. And it's funny because I was coaching a parent recently, and she had almost an identical situation to what you're describing about these rushed mornings. And she said, we're always kind of running late. And there's a lot we can kind of, on a very kind of practical level, that we can shift and change if that's what the routine looks like.
Yeah.
However, what I told her, and I think she was waiting for me to give her this like perfectly laid out, like, well, then just do this and wake up now and then do and blah. And I said to her, I want you to give yourself permission to be late. Let's start
Mm-hmm.
there, because it's going to change the energetics of what you're bringing to that exchange with your child, because
So
it's
good.
become this like, sort of combative energy between the two of
Yes.
you. And I said, what I want you to do is don't worry about being late tomorrow and the rest of the week. And I just want you to see how that starts to shift and transform. And that started on a Monday. By Thursday, they were never late again, because there was no more battle around, right?
That's
Her
right.
energetics were so settled and calm
Yes.
and different that, like, for those first few mornings, she gave herself permission to not feel the anxiousness around being late. They were late for
Mhm.
those couple of mornings, nothing big, by the way. It was like a few minutes. And as she just slowly adjusted their schedule really calmly and easily without it feeling so laborious and hard and
Mhm.
challenging and power struggles, none of it. It literally, she just needed to change the way she was looking at time and the constraints
Mhm.
of time, and how she was feeling around sort of the energetics around how she was being perceived when she was late. And
Mm.
so
So
I
good,
think,
Albiona.
thank you, but I think, like, to what you're saying, right? Like when you said, take 5 minutes to put your shoes on. We don't do that. We
Oh
get
gosh, no.
so
We're like,
frenzied. Okay,
go.
hurry up. Just come over here. I'll put your shoes on really fast. Da, da, da.
Right.
Right? Like, then we just do it. And then guess what our kids get in that moment? I'm not good enough to do this. I
Yeah.
need somebody else to fix the
Yeah.
struggle for me. I can't manage frustration. I can't manage struggle. I can't manage this, because they're always stressed and coming and doing it for me, right? Because it's
Yeah.
always in a state of stress that we're like, just get over here and I'll tie your shoe. It's never like,
Yeah.
hey, honey, I'm going to come and help you. It's
Oh my
always like we're
gosh.
so stressed out about it. So there's
Amen.
just
And
a lot to take away.
there's so much. I think this is the root of it. Slow living teaches us to fiercely and unapologetically protect our energy.
Yes,
It's all energy.
exactly.
We all know it's all energy. And I just want to say to that note, hearing that I got this little like hit of like also just being witness to when we're codependent.
Yeah.
There's so much codependency that happens with our children. Like we feel like we need to fix them, we need to
Yeah.
do everything. Man, when you let that go, when you let them be their own little soul and their own little journey, taking their time, yes, it might take them 5 minutes, and the whole time your nervous system's like, let's go,
Yeah.
but it's like there is a part of you that just that's surrender,
Yeah.
that is surrender right there. And I find that our children, most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, match, our energy, match our nervous system. It's why, we love to travel, and people are like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you travel with little ones. I'm like, I don't worry about them. I worry about my state. I
Hmm.
stay in
Hmm.
my best frame of mind, and I regulate my nervous system. They will match me. Like I really find that to be true. And so the slower that I go, the less reactive I am, the less anxious. Honestly, a lot of times the less angry that I get.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden it's like our household all just flows, more at ease and simply and beautifully. And it's just like we're very relaxed over here. But that has to do with my energy and my husband's energy. We have to work on ourselves first. And this is the thing that I think as women, especially, And men too, because I've done a lot of work with men around this too, is that, we feel like we have to, be the ones to do all the things and get everything done. And I don't need any help. It's like all that's doing is dysregulating your nervous system. And then you wonder
Mm.
why everything else around you feels dysregulated, including your children. It's like, well, it's all a frequency, it's all an energy. So if you're not working on your energy,
Yeah,
like, yeah, they're going to match that. And if it doesn't feel good, then that's what you're putting out is what you're getting back. So we have to
totally.
be so protective of our energy and therefore our attention, right? Because whatever our attention is on, it's going to shift our energy. So I
Yeah.
think that's really the practice of like when and it doesn't have to be in the morning. You said you
Yeah.
shared like the morning, and for some people it may be the morning, but um I do think there is some significance to having some devotional. I don't like it feels masculine to me to say like, oh, this is my morning routine. It's not a
Yeah.
routine for me. It's different every day. It depends on where I'm at, my cycle, my rhythm. But having some devotional time to yourself, it's nervous system regulation and it translates to the rest of your day. And it feels so wonderful. And I just want to say that with like a little asterisk of like, it's not every day,
Yes.
like it's not all peace and rainbows and joy over here. Like, yes, there's hard days, tricky days, and then we just laugh at it and go, ah, we're not always our best selves, are we? Like
Yes.
there's
Yes.
no perfection here. And I think that's really a big part of parenting that we miss, even online when it's like such a vulnerable, quote unquote, vulnerable world. It's like there's still some form of perfectionism of like even what you're sharing vulnerably. And
Yes.
it's not like that. Life is messy. We are messy. That example that you shared with your children, when you picked them up, if it were me, I would have picked them up and gone, hey, mommy was just a total like crazy person trying to get here. And now I feel so dysregulated. Will you guys take a couple deep breaths with me? Like, we're all here to like, we do that all the time. In fact, like my
Yeah.
children correct me all the time. They're like, Mom, take a deep breath. I'm like, oh, darn it. My work is working against me, But
Right.
like we get to just be human even with our children. We get to explain why we're late, why we did this, why we did
Exactly.
that. There's no control here. I think when you surrender that, it's easier to be slow and still and, let life unfold as it will.
Totally. Oh my God, I love it. And I think, the kids are kids, and anybody who sort of really commits to just, even if it's just a little bit of slowing down, if you can just commit to it, you'll start to see it right away in your children and the way that they then proceed.
Mhm.
And, what you did there was this beautiful idea of repair, something that, like at least my generation, my parents, and probably generations before
Definitely.
that certainly didn't practice that. And just the
No.
idea of like, I'm an imperfect human. I'm not this perfect parent. And I want to show you guys how I take care of myself where I might have hit a moment of stress or I might have hit a moment of dysregulation. I'm going to be the model for you guys and show you like how I'm taking care of myself. And thank you for participating in that process with me. Like
Mhm.
that collectiveness versus this hierarchy of like, I'm the dominant
Yes.
parent, you're the child who has to listen. Like certainly we want cooperation and then that helps in a lot of areas, but at the same time it all starts with us. There's that Anne Lamott quote that's my absolute favorite. I've said it before on the podcast, so I'm sure listeners know it, but I always say I think it's something along the lines of bless them and change me. Right, so the idea that like
Mm.
whatever it is, it doesn't have to be about parenting. It's like somebody can cut you off or your kids can do something. Let's say they're doing a certain behavior that's really triggering you and it's happening over and over. If you're just doing the same thing without changing yourself, nothing will change in them, right? You can't do
Mhm.
like, it's just this rinse and repeat pattern that's just going to elicit the same level of stress until we say bless them, right? Because they're developing and learning, and change me because I'm the one who has the capacity to say, well,
Mhm.
where can I shift? What can I do so that I can connect, I can
Yes.
change, I can grow, I can do the things that I need to do. And there is a lot of sort of power in being able to see things through that lens.
So much. And I don't think it's ever too young to communicate this to your children. I have a lot of
Yeah.
clients that are like, yeah, but your kids are older. And I'm like, yeah, but they're doing what they do now because when they were 3 and 4, I was
Hmm.
still talking to them this way. I was
Yes.
still creating really clear boundaries and in
Yeah.
simple ways, right? Like when mommy's in the bathroom and the door is shut, that is your sign. You are not allowed to enter. Like, this is my
Mhm.
sacred space for the next 5 minutes, whether I'm
Yeah.
showering or doing whatever I'm doing.
Mhm.
Same thing I have a spot in my house. It's like, this is my space. Nobody touches it. It's like my
Yeah.
sacred corner. And if mommy's there and you walk up and you see my eyes closed, you don't talk to me. You don't ask me for something. Like, we need to honor one another's boundaries. And
Yeah.
guess what? They get to set those with me too, which sometimes I'm like,
Yeah.
ugh. But it's like, yeah, when they were younger, of course it took multiple times of, hey, remember this? Hey, remember this? Hey, remember this? But our children are so wise, yes, their chronological age may be 4, but their soul's age could be so much older. So don't, don't think for them, share what
Yeah.
you can, communicate what you can, model what you can. They'll pick it up, and gosh, it just makes you as a mother feel like I have more boundaries, more space, more devotional time to myself, and it changes everything. And I do feel like it's important to say, if you're listening and you're like, whoa, like, I don't know if I feel this spiritual or this
Mhm.
connected. It's like, I don't know. I don't think it's not it doesn't have to be that way,
Yeah.
like, I think some of my most spiritual practices are my mothering,
Mhm.
are my friendships, are my relationship with my spouse. Like, it's all spiritual if I'm present enough to witness,
Yeah.
the magic in it. And I think that's really what we're talking about. Like, if you can give yourself permission to just be here, to just
Yeah.
be still, to just be present. I'm like saying this, it's 11:11 right now, of course. you know, I think that you're listening to this at this moment in time for a reason. So just like
Mhm.
lean into it.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you forever. There's
I
so much
know.
more I could
Thank
ask you
you.
to say. This has been so wonderful. So, just
Yeah.
for listeners who might be new to you, tell them where they can find you. By the way, your Instagram is so beautiful. You have the most,
Thank
like, it
you.
feels like its own little meditation. I don't go on social media a lot, but there are
Mm.
like 3 or 4 accounts that I check every day, and you're one of them.
Oh, that means
And it's
so
just,
much.
even though we have, I can chat with you anytime, and I'm so grateful and lucky to be able to call you my friend. There's just a real beautiful way that you really show up on that platform. And I just think people, if you're needing like just a really beautiful space to find on Instagram, and Lauren, you cultivate so many beautiful communities and circles and spaces. I just want to make sure people can find you and
You.
learn from your magic.
Well, thank you, Albiona. And thank you for listening, every single one of you. I really feel it's important to say, like, I feel like a part of me has kind of like, what's the word? Like, blundered through this. I don't even know if
Yeah.
that's right. Like, just like coming back right into my body postpartum. And it felt really good to just be in a safe space to do that, to know that, what I'm sharing hopefully lands, and some of it may make sense and some of it may not. And it's totally fine. So thank you for holding that space for me, Albiona, and listeners.
Of
Yeah, you can
course.
find me on Instagram. My handle is I am_Lauren. Lauren is spelled with a Y instead of an E. Truly, that's where I spend the most time, and where you can find out, everything about me and what I have to offer in this season. I did today literally just share something that's really near and dear to my heart, which is a breathwork facilitator training, which, as you heard, in this podcast, was such a big part of my own personal healing process. So it feels like really tender. Like, I had to go out today and like literally fall to my knees, like head on the ground, and just like ground my whole body, Albiona. Because I was just like, okay, we're doing this. It's time. Like, Benny, I'm trusting that it's time, and you're just gonna show me what to do and who needs to show up. So, things like that, retreats that I offer. We have some really cool retreats coming up that I haven't shared yet. All the things you can really find out there. You can also go to laurynlaszczak.com. I'm sure you'll have that in the show notes.
Yes.
And honestly, I think that I want to invite you to send me a DM, send me a personal message if you listen to this. Like, I think our souls need to connect with other like souled women more often, and that creates so much purpose in us. And so I would love to connect with you in that way if you're listening and you feel called. So thank
Oh
you.
my gosh, please feel called. And just as far as the breathwork thing goes, I'm so excited for you. I've done one breathwork session with you and I plan to do more, and it was
Mhm.
life changing. And I'm not saying that just for the purposes of like, you know, sounding grandiose. It was really, I've done breath work with other people, and I won't go too far into it, but the breath work session we had was very different than anything I've ever experienced. And it was so
Mm.
beautiful. It was so healing. I'm a very somatic person, meaning when I have things in my body, I'm not cognizant or even cognitively aware of it. I have to sort of move, and all of a sudden I start to get messages, or I start to get solutions, or all of a sudden a vision comes through and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what I need to be doing. So, it doesn't surprise me that through breath work, I was able to sort of anchor and realize things that I needed to be shown and seen, but it was really through your magic that I could do that. So I
Oh,
can't encourage people, and like, you must, if you're somebody who is even interested or curious about breath work, you have to be in
yeah.
Lauren's circle and in her world.
Thank you for sharing that. I think for me, the lesson has been that the breath work speaks for itself, but really the true work is learning how to be the clear channel for it. You know,
Yeah.
it's like I feel like when I step into breathwork facilitator mode, I can't even really tell you afterwards what happened because it's just like not me, you know,
Yeah.
it's everybody you need to show up for you. It's everything you need to release. Like your body does the work and I'm just like the channel. So it's really
Yes.
exciting for me. I'm really pumped. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh my goodness. Well, Lauren, thank you so much. Everyone, if you go to the show notes, you'll be able to find the links there so that you can connect with Lauren. Lauren, you know I love you so much, but
Thank
I'm
you.
excited for the world to get to hear and see all the beautiful things you do.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to do that.